Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, we'll be looking at how to build a URL shortener app in Flutter. So there's the app we'll be working on today, and let's explore some of the features. So as you would expect, a URL shortener app should be able to shorten a URL. So on the home page, we have an input field where you can type a URL, and then when you press on this byte link, it gets shortened. So let's test this out. I'm going to type a URL. So this is going to be my GitHub account URL, right? And I'm going to shorten it by pressing on the byte link. So when I press on this byte link, I get this short snack bar that says bitten link copied to clipboard. And when I come to the history section, I have the link that I just shortened. So you can see my GitHub link here, then the short form of it. And I have this remove icon button that I can press on it to remove this link from the history. And we can try again. It's a different link. So let me type something different. So let's try to shorten this link as well. When we type on it and we realize it doesn't take long for the link to get shortened and copied to the clipboard. And we come to the history section, also realize the link we just shortened is on top, right? And we can remove the first one and delete the first one from our history, and we can remove all the links from our history as well. And when we press on this link, so when we just tap on it, it's going to open the respective app that handles this link. And if there is no app to handle this link, then it's going to open the browser. So if I tap on this should open a YouTube app. Okay, so as you can see, my YouTube app gets opened, right? And then there's the channel, the link I shortened. So when we go back again, and then when we long press on this short link, right, when we long press on it, it gets copied to the clipboard, and we can paste it in any app. So if I open Google Chrome, I can paste the copied link here, and then when I hit on go, it's going to open YouTube in Google Chrome, right? So that's what we'll be working on today, and let's get right into the video. So to get started, I have a simple app running, and in the home of my app, I have this root app stateful widget, which is returning the text byte link in the app bar. So this is going to be our entry point for this project. But before we begin, let's first go to our pubspec.yaml and install certain dependencies. So go to your pubspec.yaml file, and we'll be using these dependencies in our project. So the first one is icons. That's the icon package we'll be using, right? And then the second one is equatable, and this for value equality. You'll get to know of it when we start adding links to our history. We also need a Google font package because I want to change the font we'll be using. We also need a package called URL launcher, and that's what will allow us to open the links in other apps. We also need a dio package, and we'll be making API requests with this package. And that's all that we need for now. The icons, equatable, Google fonts, URL launcher, and then the dio package. So after adding these packages, you can save your pubspec.yaml. Also, we'll be using some assets, the illustration that I showed in the demo. So under the assets section of your pubspec.yaml, add the folder where your illustration is located. I'll leave a link to the whole project and the illustration in the description. So I've created a folder called assets, and then I've added this illustration there. and I'm referencing this assets folder in my pubspec.yaml. So after doing that, just save the file, and then Flutter pub-get should run automatically. So as you can see, Flutter pub-get is running, and after some seconds it should be done. So Flutter pub-get is done running, and let's start working on our project. So we'll first work on our bottom navigation bar, which is going to toggle between our home page and then our history section of our app. So within the scaffold, let's create a bottom navigation bar, and we are going to use the bottom navigation bar property of the scaffold, which accepts a widget, and I'm going to give it the widget bottom navigation bar. As you may expect, this bottom navigation bar accepts or expects a list of bottom navigation bar items, right? So it's required list bottom navigation bar items. So I'm going to provide bottom navigation bar items, right? And each item requires an icon and a label, and from the icons package we installed, this is going to give us some icons, right? That will be used for our project. So I'm going to use icon and then icons.home outline. When you save this file, whilst you have just one link, you are going to get an error, right? And the error states that items.length is greater than or equal to 2 is not true, which means you can't have one item in your bottom navigation bar. So let's duplicate this twice, and let's put our comma there, and also add our label. So the label for this is going to be the home, then the label for this is going to be the history. And now when we hot restart our app, we should have our bottom navigation bar. So we have our bottom navigation bar, and now let's change the icons for the history. Let's change the icons for the history section. So instead of icons.home outline, I'm going to use the document attach outline icon, and that's the icon I use for the history. You can use any other icon of your liking, right? Also, I want to change these icons when the bottom navigation bar, that particular icon is active. So for now, as you can see, I'm using the outline version of these icons, and when the icon is active, I want to use the solid version, which is the name of the icon without any outline. So this is the solid version of the home icon, and I'm going to do same for the history section as well. I'm going to change it to document attach. So now you can see that this has turned to solid. Now let's create 2 pages for the for our route. So let's create one for the home and another one for the history. So I'm going to my lib folder. I'm going to create another directory called pages, and within that I'll create the home page and also the history page. Now within the home page is going to be a simple stateful widget. So I'm just going to create a stateful widget with the help of the Flutter extension. So stateful widget, I'm going to give it a name home page, and also import the required import, so package flutter material.dat, right? And then for now, let's return a text in the center of the page that says home page. And then we're also going to do the same for the history page. So I'm going to copy this, go to the history page and paste it there, and then change it to history, and also change this to history page. I think I didn't spell the history well, so change change it to history page. And now back in our root app, we have to show one of these pages based on the current active bottom navigation bar, right? So let's create a variable to store the active index of the bottom navigation bar. I'm going to call it active page index and first set it to 0, right? So it means this is going to be the active bottom navigation bar when the app starts running. And within the bottom navigation bar, we have something called current index. So the current index is the index that we are actually on. So for now, we are setting it to 0, which when we save the file, we're not going to see any difference because by default it is 0. And how do we change this? So the bottom navigation bar has the on tap method that we can use, and this on tap method, this value over here is the index that we are tapping on, which is of type int. So we are going to set state and then change our active page index. So our active page index to this new value that we had. When we tap on this, now you see that it changes to the history because we are changing the current index with the help of our active page index. So when we tap on it, we are setting this value, which is the index we had, to our active page index. Then our active page index is in turn giving it to our current index, which is changing the current but the active bottom navigation bar. And what we want to do is we want to change the body of our app based on the current index of our bottom navigation bar. So within the body, we are first going to have our widgets, so the home page and then the history page in an array, right? So a better way would be to create an array of pages. So list pages, you can just make it pages, and let's type it to widgets, a type of widget, and this will contain our pages, so our home page and then our history page. Then our body is going to contain our pages, but then with the current active page index, right? When we save this, realize we have the home page, and now when I change it to history, we now have the history page, right? So this is how we are going to toggle between our pages. And now let's start working within our home page. So within our home page, we first have the illustration and then some heading text, a text, and then an input field. So let's start working on that. And I'm going to first start with a list view. The reason is because maybe on a smaller device this page supposed to scroll, so when you start with a widget like column, it's not going to be scrollable unless you wrap it in a single child scroll view. What I'm going to do is, instead of returning just the center, I'm going to return a list view, which is just like a column but then it's scrollable. And then the children of this list view, the first one is going to be an image, so image.asset, and then the illustration we had in our assets, so this illustration, right? And when I save, we have our illustration there, but you can see it's too huge, it's too big, so I'm going to give it a fixed width of 300, and that will reduce the size of the illustration. Also, I want the next thing is going to be a text, so let's put a text here, and then I'm going to copy the contents of the text in, so a simple link but powerful too. Yeah, and we have our text here. Also, we realize that the text is touching the edges of the screen, so I'm going to give the list view some padding, padding all around, and a value of 15. So when I save, our image shrinks down a bit, and then the text is also moved away from the edge of the screen. Let's also center our text, so I want to have this text centered, and I'm going to use the text align dot center property and increase the font size of our text. With that, I'm going to the style and then a text theme from my team. So this is how we do it. So this will give me the headline 6 of my team. But then we are not having our font, so we install the Google Fonts package. So let's try using the Google Fonts package. So let's go to our main.dat file, and then within our theme we are going to set a new text theme. So this text theme is going to be our Google Fonts text theme. So we type Google Fonts dot then the name of the text theme you want to use. In this project I'll be using the Poppins text theme. So autocomplete is not working right now, but then we can type, and within this text theme it accepts a text theme, right? So we realize that it accepts an optional text theme, and we are going to provide a text theme within our theme. I mean, it is theme.ofcontext.text theme. And now when you save for the first time, you should have an error for the Google Fonts package. So we have to, yeah, I said it. You have to restart your whole app. So stop it and then restart the app all over. Okay, so our app is in, and then as you can see the text has changed to the Poppins text. So let's go to our home page and then continue with our design. We want to also have some space between the next text, so let's create a sizer box to give some spacing. And in actual projects, big projects, I recommend you use the padding more often than the sizer box. So the sizer box of height 10, and then another text which I'm going to copy in. So let's have another text here, right? And this is just the text I wrote, and then I'm giving it a text theme of subtitle 1. You can give it any font size you want, it doesn't actually matter. And then a text align of center. So now the next thing to work on is our input field, and also we need some spacing before our input field, so I'm going to copy the sizer box and then paste it here as well. And our input field is going to be within a form. And the reason why it's going to be within a form is we want to perform some validations when the user type in the input field. So we don't want to accept anything that is not a URL, or at least doesn't conform to the patterns of the URL. So let's first create a form, and then the child of this form is going to be a text form field. And when we save, we should have a basic form field, but then I want to style it a bit. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the keyboard type of this form, and the value is going to be text input type dot URL, because I want to have the .com and the slash on the keyboard automatically. So I don't want the default keyboard. And also I want to decorate this form. So the text form field has a decoration, and it takes in an input decoration. And then what I want to do is I want to have a rounded border around this form. So within the input decoration there is something called border, right? So border, and this border is expecting an input border. I'm going to use the outlined input border. So when I save this, you realize that our text field is now having border all around. And I want to also change the border radius. So within the outlined input border there is the border radius property, and I want to use the circular. So border radius dot circular, give it a value of 100, and now we should have a rounded border radius. Also, our input field looks too huge, so I'm going to reduce the padding of the input, and we can do that with the content padding. That's outside the border property. So within the decoration we have content padding, and that is going to be takes an edge geometry, so Flutter edge insect, and then I want to have 14 on the vertical and then 8 on the horizontal. So when I save, the padding shrinks down a bit. Also, I want to have a hint text within our input. So within the input decoration, I want to have a hint text, and that will be enter your URL. Yep. Also an icon here. So the input decoration has a prefix icon, and I'm going to use an icon from the unicorns package called link. And we're almost done with our input field. Also, I want to validate this input field whenever a user interacts with it, right? So with that, the text form field has a property called auto validate mode, and this auto validate mode also expects auto validate mode. So auto validate mode on user interaction, and what this will do is it will validate this input whenever a user interacts with it, right? And also we need a way to run these validations. So in the text form field, we have a validator method we can use, and this validator method returns a value. So this value is going to be based on the current state, if I write this right, on the current state of our text field. So this is going to be the value the user types in, and the first thing we want to check is if the value is empty. So if the value is empty, then we want to return a particular error message. We want to return something like please enter a URL. But as you can see, the property empty can't be unconditionally accessed, so I'm going to use the now accession operator, and this will allow me to access the value. And when I save, that automatically returns now for me. But this is not going to be the only validator operation that we run. We have to also check if the value the person is entering starts with either HTTPS or starts with www. Right? So another if statement to do that, and if not, the value starts with, right? So if it doesn't start with HTTPS : / or the value doesn't start with www. Right? So if the value doesn't start with any of these, then we want to return another error. So please enter a valid URL. And the last validation method or validation we want to run is using a regex, right? The regex will allow us to run much solid validation than just this if statement. So I went online and then searched for regex for URLs, and I had one, so you don't have to go through that process, and I'm going to copy it in. So there is the regex. So this regex checks for URLs. It's a pattern for URL, right? And what we are doing is we are checking if the value the user provided does not match the regex. So if it does not match it, then we also return and please enter a valid URL. And when we focus and we test this, as soon as I start typing, you see please enter a valid URL as an error message, right? Because the validation is run whenever a user interacts with the text form. So the next thing is to get a button to submit our form. So let's again create some sizer box below the text form field. So I'm going to create a sizer box outside the form. So sizer box of height 20, and then if I put my comma as well, and also a button, right? So I'm going to create a button, elevated button. For now, the on price to be that, and then a text of byte link. Good. So we should have this button, which doesn't look very well. So let's apply some styles to it, and I'm going to use the elevated button the star from property or method, the star from. I'm going to first change the shape of this elevated button. So we have the shape property. I'm going to use the stadium border, and that will give it this form of rounded shape. And I'm also going to increase the padding within the button. So I'm going to copy in the padding, right? And I'm giving the top 13 and the horizontal 8. This will create this button. Now the next thing is how we access values in our form, so our input, and with that we are going to use the form. So the form actually requires a key, right? That key will help us to validate this text form field. That's when the user press on this button. We want to make sure that the value in the text field is correct. It matches our pattern that we've provided before we do anything with this form. So in order to do that, I'll first come under my state, and I'm going to create a global key. So it's just going to be a variable. I'm going to name it a private variable form key, and then set it to a global key, which is of type form state. And if you want to know more about this, you can read the Flutter documentation or the Flutter cookbook. It has more information about this. So I'm going to pass this form key to our form field. So the key is going to be our form key, right? And now when this button is pressed, we want to check if the validation on this form is right before we do anything else. So we can write a simple if statement, and if our form key dot current state dot validate, right? Then we want to do something, but then this form key can't be accessed unconditionally, so we have to use the now assertion operator. That's the exclamation mark before it, and also the validate, right? So if our form key let me correct this form key. So I'm going to change it to form key with camel keys, right? And I think it's not working, so I have to manually change that. So form key, it's camel keys, right? So if our form key doesn't validate, right, which is our text field, if the validation fails, then we want to do something. So we want to show a snack bar to the user, and in order to show snack bar, we are going to use the scaffold messenger. So scaffold messenger dot of context dot show snack bar, and that will give us a snack bar. So we have to pass in a snack bar widget. and this snack bar widget takes in a particular content, the content you want to show. And for now, we are just going to write a text. So the text is, please enter a valid URL. So whenever we click on this button, we are going to check if our text form validates. If it doesn't validate, that's why we are using the not over here, right? If it doesn't validate, then we are going to show the snack bar. So if I press on this, will I get the snack bar which says please enter a valid URL. So anything below the if statement will be whatever you want to run. But also, we don't want this function to have, aside just showing the snack bar, we don't want this function to continue running, so we are going to return from it. Good. Now it's left with how we will access a value. So after the user has entered whatever value URL, we have to access that URL and use it for whatever we want, right? So if we want to shorten it, whatever we want to do, we have to access that value, and we are going to use a text editing controller to do that. So in Flutter, if you want to access values from text field, one easy way you can do that is to use the controller and a text editing controller, of course. So I'm going to create a variable for that controller under my state. So I'm going to call URL text controller, and that's going to be equal to a text editing controller. And I'm going to pass this controller to my form. So just anywhere within the form, I can pass this controller like this, and now this controller will hold the state of our form, so the text, to be precise, of our form, that's our text field. So let's try submitting the form to see if we can get the value. So below the onPress, within the onPress but below the if statement, I'm going to print the URL text controller dot text. So this will give us the text that is in the text controller. So I'm going to enter something here like www.something.com. Done. And for some reason, let's check it out. Okay, so let's check within our validation to see what we did wrong. I think the error is from here. So if it doesn't start with HTTPS and it doesn't start with www instead of not starting with instead of all, it's supposed to be end, right? So if it doesn't start with any of these, then we are returning this error, right? So that should fix the error. And now when we hit on byte link, we see the www.something.com printed out in the debug console. So that's how we access values in text form fields or any text field in Flutter. Now the next thing is to use this value to do something, right? So the whole idea about this URL shortening is based on a particular API, right? So the API is called shortcode.de, and let me so when I bring this API documentation, the shortcode API documentation, whereas we have the API base which we'll be using, and then this is how we use it. So you first make either a get or post request to this API, and then you pass in a URL as a query parameter. That is the URL you want to shorten, and it's going to return a particular response, and the response looks like this. So it has this um, okay property on it, which is either true or false depending on whether an error occurred or not. And then it has this results, and this results has a lot of properties and values, right? So let's make a request to this API when the user submits this input field, right? So I'm going to create a function to deal with that, and let me first move this out of the screen. So let's create a function called byteLink that will take care of the whole process of generating the short link. So under the state, I'm going to create a function byteLink which takes in a URL, and then the first thing we want to do when the person press on this byteLink button is we want to show the loading indicator before we start anything else. And the loading indicator we are going to show is going to be in a dialog. So we first call the show dialog method, and then this builder should return whatever like we want to show, right? So we want to return a dialog. So in the show dialog, we want to return a dialog, right? And first, the background color of this dialog is going to be white. So colors.white, and also the child is going to be a column, right? A column with some children, and then the first child is going to be the circle progress indicator that's adaptive, and a sizer box for some spacing. So if I put my comments, well, sizer box for spacing, and then also a text that says we are biting your link. If I put my comments, well, good. So this is going to be our loading indicator, and let's wrap the column in a padding that doesn't touch the edges of our container. I'm going to give padding all around of 20. Good. So we can test this out. byteLink. So let's pass in the controller.text to the byteLink function. So let's call the byteLink function, and then it expects a URL. We are going to give in the URL controller.text, and that's going to be the value the user typed in. And we will first show this loading indicator, and then below it we are going to call the API and pass in the URL the person provided. So let's tap on this byteLink and see how it works. Let me save the file. Oh, okay, so it is working, but then we see that it takes up the whole page, and also the user can dismiss this loading indicator. So in order to fix that, let's first come to our dialog, and then within the column change the main axis size dot main. And also there is a property on the dialog called the show dialog instead, called barrier dismissible, that we pass in false. So what this means is that the user won't be able to dismiss this dialog. When we press on it again, right, we get this simple dialog, and right now I can't dismiss the dialog, so I would have to restart the app. Yeah, okay. So below it we are going to call our API with the URL, right? The URL we get from the parameter. This video is taking too long, so we will end here and then continue next time. If you like today's video, hit the like button, subscribe and comment as well. Thank you very much.